Okay, guys, please join me in giving a terrific Soho Apple Store welcome to the director of Slacker, Dazed and Confused, the Before Sunrise trilogy, and several other films that I'm not going to go. The Bad News Bears, let's not forget that, and the new IFC release, Boyhood. As I said before, one of the great figures of American independent cinema over the last 20 years, Richard Linklater.
What an odd filmography you chose out of 8 so many titles. That's fine.
What was the oddest choice?
Oh, no, it's all good. Anyway.
So, Rick, the thing that some people, I guess probably by this point, a lot of people have read or heard about this film, that you started making this film 12 years ago, and you didn't get it finished until now.
Around this time in 2002.
And what motivated you to do such a crazy thing?
Well, yeah, it is a crazy idea, admittedly. This idea came out of, I always think like in science, a lot of your breakthroughs are your problem solving. You're trying to fix something. And what I was trying to fix was how to tell a story about growing up. All my ideas were dispersed throughout. I'd have an idea. I couldn't pick my one little 400 blows moment or when you're making a film with kids, you're obviously, no one talks about it, but it's pretty obviously, you're stuck with the physicality of your young actor or actors. You can't just have a 8-year-old and say, okay, now you're 13, let's play that. You can't do that. And if there's a big enough gap, maybe you can cast someone else who looks vaguely like them and we all agree, like, okay, it's not them, but storytelling, we buy it. But this, I was really going for all of it. So I'd kind of given up on the idea of making this movie, and then the idea hit me. Like, oh, wow, why can't you just do a movie where you film a little bit and that I could cover this, this broad cinematic canvas sort of opened up. And, oh, yeah, I can show the whole thing. I can show first grade and high school and, junior high and the whole experience. So 1 through 12, first through 12th grade, that's where the 12 years came from. And then it's called Boyhood, but it really could be called, parenting, parenthood. I guess that's taken. But, it's about parenting. It's about figuring out how to be a parent as well. He's got Patricia Arquette and Ethan play their kind of divorced parents, but, it's just maneuvering through life. So that was the idea, was like, oh, wow. So that was the fun part. Like, oh, what a good idea. I haven't seen a movie like that. Can it work? But then the hard part was actually doing it. 12 years. So.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear about this, so you cast this kid, Eller Coltrane, who's really wonderful.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy.
When he was 6 years old.
I met him when he was 6. The first year when we were shooting, he was 7. Yeah.
Okay, but you shot him from age 7 to age 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And
he's 19 now, so.
And your daughter Lorelai is also in the film as his sister.
Yeah.
She was a little older at the beginning?
Yeah, she was 9 when we started. He was 7, she was 9.
And she's like 20 now?
21.
21.
Just turned 21.
Wow.
So. Yeah, so it's pretty tough. I mean, I never showed them footage all these years, and didn't even feel like a movie. It was like we'd shoot about 3 days a year. And it was like making 12 movies. You have to get the crew back together. You have to cast additional roles, location scout, tech scout, everything you would do on a movie, rehearse, and just all that. We would edit every year. Each one was like its own movie. But, they're joined together kind of seamlessly. But I never really showed them. It didn't feel like a movie because there weren't any expectations. The finish line was so far. Usually when you're making a movie, it's like, oh, we'll be done in the spring and maybe we could come out in the fall. There's a end zone somewhere in there. But this was almost abstract. For about the first 5 years, it just felt like something we were doing. I guess some of the actors thought it was, I never thought of it as an experiment because it was pretty specific what we were trying to do, but it just felt like something else. I always call it like a time sculpture or something. But I didn't show the footage to the kids, but when we finished the film, all these years later, I gave them a DVD and just said, I suggest you watch this like alone. And just to build your relationship. We all have home movies and pictures, and we all have records of our lives at different age, but few people have narrative, films that depict yourself well lit or whatever, in a different context. So I knew it'd be pretty mind-blowing for both of them. They find themselves in a position I don't think any actors ever really have.
No.
Not in a narrative. I mean, people have been subjects of documentaries like, oh, here I was in high school, and then years later they've seen themselves, but I don't think quite in this form. So I think we were all very, I don't know if it was protective or I was just sensitive to that. And so I think
And how did they react to that experience, seeing themselves as 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds in this film?
Eller, I gave it to him, and then I just didn't hear from him for a while. I was like, you okay? And then he said, yeah, I watched it 3 times or so. I cried a lot, but just emotionally. They both really liked the movie, but my daughter, young woman with all those, I don't know, she was like, yeah, it's really good. There's just one problem. There's this one really horrible performance and ugly person in it. Herself, of course, and she's actually really great in the movie. I'm so proud of her, and everybody loves her in the movie. But she kind of steals it to a way. But you don't see that. You see yourself. Remember how awkward it was when you were young to even hear your own voice recorded or see yourself, and that's kind of why I didn't show it to him over the years, because I didn't want him getting self-conscious or thinking something was odd in their, the way they looked or anything, because it's kind of. But it is to see people go through awkward ages, but the adults too. Ethan and Patricia start this in their
they're in their
30s, and by the end they're in their well into their 40s. So they, as Ethan said once, I was showing him 8 years of the film. We were watching it. It's like, wow, they really grow up. We age. Yeah, I said, I don't know when that point is when you stop growing and start aging, but it when it's happening.
Yeah, I sort of think the secret subject of this film is growing older as an adult.
That's even harder. It's it's tougher. Yeah.
And did your directing your daughter in a film, would that become an aspect of your father-daughter relationship over these years?
I mean, you would think it would be a big deal, but it kind of wasn't. She grew up on movie sets. She had known Ethan since she was 9 months old. It's just really natural for her to be around me in a film environment. She was a natural performer. She really wanted the part. I didn't ask her to do it. She told me she was gonna, once she realized there was a part for an older sister, kind of around her age range. She sort of claimed the part, and I realized that would make my life easier. In a way, I would know, because the volatility, the unknowns of 12 years, the worst thing that can happen, and I didn't know that until I headed into this film. You can't really contract anyone to do anything over 7 years. And so you can't say, hey, you have to do this. It was all kind of, we just kind of handshake agreement, faith that it would be a worthwhile thing to do. But the last thing I wanted was an actor moving to another country, one of these kids whose family takes off, and it just would have made it difficult. I wanted an ongoing collaboration. So Eller lives where I live in Austin, Texas, and I could just call him up, or I would see him throughout the year if time allowed. We would get together, and I would talk about what's coming up next year and just see where he was at. And it was kind of this ongoing collaborative life project that was a lot of fun. My own daughter, at least I knew where she would be every year. So that was one less volatile element to the potential trouble minefield out there.
But is it true that Lorelai asked you once whether her character could die in the film?
Yeah, well, that was about 4 years in. There was a moment, and I didn't really understand it. Yeah, it was the year she has to. There's a scene where the kids dress up and go to a Harry Potter book release. A midnight.
That's such a great scene.
Yeah. So this whole film, I was always like, what's the thing you would remember? I wanted it to feel like a memory. If you're that age now, looking back on your life, it would be, oh yeah, there was this thing where we showed up and got a book at midnight. That never happened when I was a kid, and it might not happen again. So those of you who are that age, it might be a once-in-a-lifetime kind of phenomenon. But it was kind of fun. My daughter loved those books so much, and it just seemed, I had read them because it started, I was reading them to her. And then there was that sad day where she just got the book, and read it and didn't need me anymore. That happens. But she was dressing up, and I thought maybe she thought she was too cool to do that, but it wasn't that. She still liked it. I thought maybe she was dressing up as McGonagall, not Hermione. I thought she was pissed about that, but that wasn't it either. She told me just a few weeks ago, we were in London at the Harry Potter World, or the studios, where it's a really cool thing where they made the movies. All the sets are still there. You can go visit. It's like an amusement park, really, or a theme park or whatever. That Harry Potter had been so real to her at that time. Me making her dad, I was kind of crapping on, her reality, where she thought she was going to get a letter from Hogwarts or something. And, so that's what the emotional reaction. But overall, I mean, that was just a blip. It's kind of funny, can my character die? But I said, no, it's a little dramatic for the movie. We're not going to do that. But she was back with it. She worked hard and liked the whole process. And also, movie sets are fun for kids, even they're fun for everybody, especially young people. There's a lot of food, a lot of adults doting on you, a lot of, it's potentially a lot of fun. So it was my goal to make it a fun thing in their lives, and something you look forward to, somewhere between like summer art camp or acting, performing camp, and like a family reunion. There's a crew coming back every year too. A lot of people.
Did you have the same crew for the whole time?
Well, as much as you can. It was always getting cast, scheduling. There's a lot of practical, logistical concerns, but a lot of the crew worked the whole time. It was kind of amazing. And they really looked forward. It was fun for them to grow up with the kids, on this, for them to just, it was like a big, they always say movies are like a family. They kind of are, but this was that times 12,
Why don't we take a look at a clip that's from fairly early in the film? I think the kids are fairly young in this one. This is with Patricia when they're getting ready to move.
Oh, yeah, this is...
anything you want to say about this one before we take a look at it?
Yeah, it's in year one.
Year one, okay.
She's going back to school, the single mom, and she's just pulling them away from their friends and their house. And, when you're a kid, that's pretty traumatic.
Moving is tough, yeah.
Yeah, it's not really fun. So the older sister's giving mom hell, I think. Boy, clips on this movie are really tough because it's this collection of small little intimate moments. Mostly when you see someone on a talk show and they're showing you a clip, you got to think, okay, that's either the funniest scene in the movie or the most exciting, or you wouldn't be showing a clip on The Tonight Show. We don't have any clip in this whole movie. I don't know what it says about the movie, but it's really hard to it needs a lot of context, and it seems so kind of normal. So,
well, it's because it's a movie that it doesn't depend on somebody committing a felonious act or shooting somebody else in the head. It's about a lot of little moments.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, but it's just each one out of context is just I feel kind of weird about it. It's like, that's not the movie. It's much greater than the parts. I hope.
I think that's definitely true.
Yeah.
And how much, we were talking about this a little bit the other day, how much did you allow the kids' real lives as they grew up to influence what went into the movie?
Well, you start with a bunch of ideas. I remember telling Eller, this isn't you at the beginning. Both of the kids were, I think, in a way, much more advanced in their characters. We wanted them just to be quote unquote normal kids, whatever that is. So they didn't really dress the way they dressed. Their taste wasn't going to be, shown till they were a little bit older. But I told them, at some point you'll merge with the character. It'll start to be you. So at the beginning of the film, he's just laying in the grass, staring at the sky. I think that's kind of Eller. That's not really Eller. That's Mason, this character. By the end, he's up in a mountain, sitting, gone off to college. That is kind of him. It's him. But I didn't really use specific things from his life, like, oh, this happened to me this year. Oh, let's put that in the movie. Just little things, like he would call me. He was very conscious about his responsibility to the movie. He'd call me up and go, hey, is it okay if I get an earring? Is that, would that fit the story? And, or he had some nail polish on one year, and I thought, oh, let's use that. So I was always just taking from him whatever he was at, but it wasn't a lot of big story things. But that said, I would give him assignments the year before. I would say, okay, next year you meet a girl at a party and you have this kind of intimate conversation. So for the next year, I want you to, when you're in that situation, by this point he's high school age, and I said, look, write down stuff. I want you to write this scene, with me, like write down a conversation you would have. You need to reveal more about yourself here, what you're thinking and how you're feeling, and so he would just spend that year and come at me with stuff. So he just became a collaborator, just like any other actor I would like to work with. And by the end, we're sitting around the table rewriting scenes together. I mean, I work with him just like I would Ethan Hawke or Patricia or anybody.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And now, it appears that nobody has ever done this exact thing before, filming the same cast of people over a really extended period of time. There are a few things that are slightly similar, including your 3 films with Ethan and Julie Delpy. The Michael Apted made a series of terrific documentaries about real people's lives.
I think you see it more in the documentary realm. Yeah. But even then, they have these big time gaps in that, which is amazing. They're up to 56 up now. They're these 7-year gaps. And Steve James, the great documentarian, he has a lot of longitudinal kind of documentaries too. So I think that's interesting. They prove how powerful cinema is, a powerful recorder of real moments and time and people and all that. But the narrative aspect is, I think it's a very simple idea, but here at the end of the road, I kind of know why no one's done it.
What was the hardest thing?
It's control. We're all control freaks. You have to be to make movies, and you realize you're relinquishing a lot of control. You're shaking hands with the random unknown future to that degree, and you're collaborating with that. So, what I heard recently, I expected to get to this phase and have someone telling me, oh, well, there was a film in Finland made from 58 to 70, but it hasn't happened. But someone told me that Stanley Kubrick, on 2 occasions, Napoleon, I think he wanted to cast a young Al Pacino, this is in the early 70s, and film him over all these years as Napoleon at different stages. So he was kind of circling this idea. And also, I think some early thinking behind AI included the character aging. So I think apparently Kubrick was around this, but I can't, of all filmmakers, to give up control, that must have been a real battle for Kubrick.
The Pacino film sounds amazing, but it could never have happened, I don't think.
Yeah, but you have to kind of give up your control freak status, and he's the ultimate control freak. But it's really intriguing to me that he was kind of playing with this idea, apparently. But I just had to say, instead of being, because people ask me, well, what if someone, would have died? What if, what if? But it's how you go through life, we all have a plan for the next 12 years. Cinema's a real natural part of my life. I want filmmaking to feel very natural. I never like those war analogies like, oh, every film is this battle to the death. A lot of guys have these war analogies. It's an unnatural thing. I was like, well, films should be natural. It's just an extension of life and who we are. And I wanted to make them feel a normal part of life. So, film's been my whole adult life. So I could imagine myself, for me, it wasn't a big deal to commit to 12 years, and neither was it Patricia or Ethan. They all knew it was an adult commitment. So, but you just have to give up, the idea that you can control all of it. Things can happen and all that, but you have to look at it at that random unknown has to be the fun part. It's like, well, who knows what's going to happen in the future? There's a scene, I was trying to get things you would remember in the presidential election of '08.
Yes.
This is before the election. It's in the campaign phase where, Ethan's character is pretty political, and they're putting in Obama signs. This is Texas, scene, so there's someone across the street with a McCain sign, obviously, and they're going to steal them. It's a fun little bit. But, I didn't know in '02 who was going to be running in '08, but it's just something from the culture. I'm like, oh, cool, let's include that. So you're sort of looking. It was a fun life project because you were always on the lookout for things that might fit into the movie. And in all that gestation time, thinking about growing up, thinking about parenting, it was also thinking about the world they were inhabiting. I wanted it to seem very realistic. So what things do you represent over the years? And it was just odd to be shooting a period piece film, looking at scenes, and well, no one's going to see this for 12 years. What's it going to look like, you know? But technology ended up being the thing that really showed the time passing. That's the only thing that changed a whole lot. Computers and you know.
And you shot the whole thing on old school 35 millimeter, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember at the time. I mean, now it's old school. At the time, I never questioned it. I knew, you know, 35 would be the way to go. It's the most stable medium, you know. So I don't regret that. But it ended up kind of the best of both worlds. Shot on film, and then all the digital goodies for post-production. And we had a joke early on, because, you know, I'd seen those technologies evolving, and it was really interesting. I was anticipating and, you know, liking everything, but it just wasn't, to me, I didn't like the way the look just yet. I've since, you know, come aboard that with certain cameras and things, but I would joke, you know, filmmaking is so much about the perfection of the image. You know, if there's a flaw, you know, it's like, oh, that was the perfect take, but there was a mic shadow, you know. In old school filmmaking, you had to go, don't even print it. We got to go, oh, there's a reflection in the mirror. And as we did this film, I was always saying, you know, 12 years from now, they'll be able to we'll fix that. And everybody would laugh. You know, I would say that probably 5 times a day when there was some kind of little flaw. And I was enjoying that because I just knew it would happen. And the crew would joke with me like, oh, there would just be a bust, maybe an actor, a major flaw. And someone would just say, oh, no problem. 12 years from now, we'll just fix that. You know, so. But it happened. 12 years later, we're in the post like, yeah, Even like 3 days before we were supposed to deliver everything we heard from the NFL, I had a poster in the background of a bowling alley from year 2 that they weren't letting us use. This is the kind of pain in the ass part of filmmaking that is ridiculous, but we can't legally clear that thing in the background. And it was like, okay, fuck you. Free, didn't cost anything. You know, if that was 1993, that would have taken 3 weeks and cost $40,000.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's great.
Let's give Ethan a little chance with a clip from this is a clip in the car.
A lot of car scenes.
There's a lot of scenes in the car, but I think
when you have separated parents, the dad's coming to pick you up. A lot of driving.
Yeah.
It's the only time kids talk to their parents anyway. You know, when you're driving. So.
And it's great that this particular separated dad has a GTO. I think that's the ultimate divorced dad car.
He starts off the film with a GTO. Yeah. He's still kind of hanging on to that, but by the end, I won't give it away.
No, that's a spoiler. We don't want to go there. Okay, in the car. Let's see that.
I failed to set that up properly. That he was, you know, they're in the car driving. He said, well, how was your week? Oh, fine. What are you up to? Not much. You know, that kind of conversation. He literally pulls the car over and says, no, we're going to talk to you. You know, he's really consciously trying to be a dad and have that relationship. So it's kind of endearing. His character's he's just trying hard. Not always succeeding, but trying. You know?
Yeah, I almost found that inspiring. I think I tried that with my kids about a week after I saw the movie.
I'm
not sure that it worked. But
you know, it's worth trying.
It's worth trying to connect. In terms of getting this project off the ground, was the hardest thing getting money committed, or were there other things that were more of an obstacle?
It wasn't really that hard. I got very lucky that IFC, Jonathan Searing, who's right here, over there, the man standing in the corner. I had done 2 films with him, Waking Life.
Patron of the arts, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely. I think I got lucky. I had floated the idea by a few producers I had worked with in the past, and they were just like, what are you talking about? You know, 13 years from now, we won't, you know, no, I don't. They couldn't wrap their heads around it. But I think because IFCs, you know, they're a big company, part of a media company. They got a library. They had to kind of think long term. And Jonathan, he liked the idea and gave us, you know, a couple $100,000 every year to shoot on film, pay, you know, union minimums and get it done, you know. So it was a huge leap of faith. And everybody, you know, we just, a lot of faith all around, from the film, from IFC, from, you know, so that was just a real blessing. I think, you know, no risk, no reward, you know, in this world, particularly the arts, you know, Hollywood is always hedging bets and doing all the safe stuff. And it's natural. It's a natural way of thinking. But everyone's so afraid of losing their job, or so everyone plays it safe in the industries. But you really, you got to admire people who kind of jump off the cliff with you with your crazy ideas. So I'm forever thankful.
And it seems to me that the thing you were talking about with your collaboration with the unknown future, as you have put it, is, do you do a version of that with every movie that you do? I mean, do you have to view every project as maybe a smaller version of that?
Yeah. Every undertaking and everything that you do is a big leap. You're going to be committing a lot of time and effort in your life to it. This was just that times 12. It was just a big decision. So everything felt like, I tried not to obsess about it too much, but just casting this kid, that's a huge decision. That's going to determine. So every element of it, casting and just the whole methodology and just everything. But so is life. We all commit to these career paths and partners and all these things. So it's not outside of our normal realm of behavior. It's just different in the filmmaking world, I guess.
Why don't we see if we can get some questions from the audience? I think that would be perfect. We have.
First of all, thanks for all your films. I love your movies.
Well, thank you.
And two questions. Were you influenced at all by the Michael Apted films, the documentaries, 7 Up to 56 Up, watching people over a long period of time? And also, do you have any interest in taking these characters forward after this film?
Like I said earlier, I think the documentaries I've seen that do these time jumps, or I think, maybe the better, the Truffaut, Duanwell films, 400 Blows through Love on the Run, Stolen Kisses, all those are, you see a guy age over 20 years, but it's not, again, it's kind of chapter by chapter, parts of their life. It's not, incremental year by year, but I always knew, those Michael Apted, he saw the film in LA about 2 weeks ago or so. He came up, I know him a little bit. He came up to me after, and this leads to your second part, your question about Apted told me, he says, keep going. So that I haven't even acknowledged this is over yet, but I'm starting to get asked that a lot. And I thought, well, this was just this story. I wanted to tell this story. So I don't know what I'll think in the future, but
Boyhood through first marriage, whatever.
You just never know. So.
My question here is, you gave us an example, the Obama sign. Was there a loose, was there like a campaign thing that's going to happen, or like how did you structure the entire script in the sense of to allow room for those kind of things to happen, which always happen during filmmaking, but how loose
you're asking
and how,
just scripting process.
Yeah.
Well, I had like the structure of the film. I would say highly structured. I told the cast, okay, here's where you're gonna move here, and the bigger architectural things, like changing schools or moving or getting divorced again, and it's the big things like that. I had all structured. Patricia says I called her up and we talked for 2 hours when she agreed to do this movie, and she said I kind of laid out the whole film for her. What I had that kind of worked out, but the real fun of this was that year. Film. It's frustrating sometimes because you put all your thinking up front in the script and all your thinking, and then you're shooting for whatever long your shoot is, and it's just going, and then there's post. Sometimes during a shoot you want to just slow down and say it would be great to just edit and think for a while and feel the way how it's working, and it's a real struggle sometimes, the pragmatic sense of production. You're sort of manufacturing, and I have filmmaker friends who just you want to just kind of step off and think a little bit. Well, this film allowed that. To such a degree. Shoot 3 days, edit, attach it to this ever-growing film, edit the whole thing again, maybe go off and do another movie or something, and come back and watch the whole thing, think some more, feel your way through. So incorporating all those things. So it was really written every year within the boundaries of the structure. And I'm kind of adapting things to this cast that's growing up a year every year. So I'm kind of playing off little essences of them, or and the culture and just how I think it's going. So it was fun. It was really, I'm spoiled now. I want to work like that always. Just take a lot of time off during production. And my next film,
Hi, I was able to see the film a few months ago. It's really excellent. Thanks for making it. But one thing I really enjoyed about the film was the music. And I was wondering if you could talk about, because I noticed while I was watching, I would kind of be able to pinpoint what year it was based on a popular song at the time. Is that something you were conscious of at the time? And did you go back, last year when you were putting it together, did you think, okay, 2002, this was a popular song, that Hoku song we saw in the clip? And also, that great scene with Ethan Hawke talking with Eller about the Beatles. What was the process of getting the rights for songs throughout the film? Thanks.
Great question.
Yeah, music is a big part, I mean, I wanted it to be the music of this time. So it really depended on what character's point of view it was. If it's Ethan listening, he's listening to like Wilco or Bob Dylan or something. And, at the beginning, early, Patricia's listening to, Sheryl Crow. And it just kind of runs the gamut. But a lot of the pop music or some of the hits of those years, stuff filters up to me, but music will never imprint you as much as it does, let's say, age 6 or 7 to 20, when you can hear a song and go, 8th grade, summer, like boom, boom, boom. Like music and I think smells, it's been proven, are the two most, nostalgia-inducing elements of your life. So I wanted to get that right, and a lot of the music, not all, particularly the early stuff, I was kind of going back and listening to a lot of music from those years that I hadn't really been that aware of or vaguely aware of. I have nephews, and I would pay attention to what they're listening to, and if something really impressed me, I would, maybe make a note of it. But so I had all this music, and I had a lot of interns and people who were roughly maybe a little bit older than my characters, young people around the editing room and stuff, and so a couple guys I kind of ended up consultants, but I had them write narratives about each song we were putting out there. And, I wanted some kind of personal connection, like, oh yeah, summer of '06, that was everywhere. Or I remember driving around all night listening to that. Or I broke up with a girl and I heard that song and it made me feel, like it had some connection, because they weren't really my connections. Other movies in the past, I could, that was my soundtrack of my life, but I was very aware as an older person, this wouldn't be the soundtrack of my life, but I want it to be the soundtrack of somebody's life. I didn't want to just be throwing in random stuff. So I tried to attach it to someone's, experience in a way, even if it wasn't my own. But as he got older, like into high school, his taste, kind of came to the fore. And, I was lucky to get stuff like Arcade Fire and, Black Keys, and just we got very lucky with the music. It's often really expensive and just difficult to get, but a lot of the music we had was trying to exploit maybe some connection, someone who knew somebody, so you could kind of throw it out there. I got word to Coldplay or Chris Martin, because at the beginning we have a Coldplay song, and I was like, oh, we'll never get that, but someone knew someone. I think when they hear we spent 12 years on it, we don't have any money, they kind of go, well, yeah, maybe. But we did a deal where if the movie makes a lot of money, they make a lot of money, just like a lot of the creative people involved. So it worked out, but I feel very lucky. I mean, we got the Dylan song. We got Sir Paul gave us a, band on. It was really touching. That I just felt really lucky.
Thank you. Hi, first of all, I think the Before trilogy are some of the best films I've ever seen. My question is, when I was looking up this movie, I found out that it was 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I actually think that's a perfect length for a movie like this. Did you think that you were going to make a film that long when you started?
No, I kind of, the 12 years, I thought, 10 minutes a year, roughly 2 hours. But I've never done a film that I sensed, God, this thing wants to be what it wants to be. The first year, to build those relationships and put in the scenes I wanted, and to the pace of it, it was just coming in a little long every year. And I was like, well, I'll keep editing but it was just, I've never really made, of all my movies, I've never really cracked 2 hours. I believe in that, like especially comedies, efficient storytelling. Don't, I'm not one of those guys who just every film should be 3 hours long. I've made 80-minute films. I think that's a good length for a movie. So this just wanted to be, at the end of the day, I was cutting things year 11 and 12 from the first year still, and it just wanted to be not a minute longer than this or a minute shorter. And I was ready for some backlash, like, oh, I don't have 2 hours and 40 minutes to be in a movie theater. But I was like, if we can spend 12 years, you can spend an extra 25 minutes, watching the movie. I was thankful no one's complained about that. No one has ever, from the feedback we've gotten so far, people are like, oh, if you like it, you're just in for the whole run. It just, time goes by, It's a weird phenomenon. What I've experienced, people they had no idea it was that long. Like they're feeling like they didn't know how long it was after it was over. They felt it was a lot shorter. But you know how time's very relative. It just kind of flies by. And I was talking to someone the other day, a critic was interviewing me. He says, your film's the exact running time of the new Transformers movie.
That's true.
And he
yeah.
said, I couldn't wait. That felt like a lifetime or something. He was complimenting this film, but I haven't seen that film. But
Hi, I'm just wondering, who are your biggest influences in terms of like film, whether it be a director or an actor? I have two questions. The second one goes to waking life. Can you lucid dream?
oh yeah. The Waking Life was based on a kind of a lucid dream I had as a teenager, believe it or not. And it's been a phenomenon. I just kind of naturally did that a lot. So making that movie, I kind of got into the science of it. So it's kind of a how-to manual for those who are interested in it. Some of those techniques are, so it was a phenomenon I was very interested in. But I don't so much anymore, but I could if I think about it. It's a kind of a discipline you can do. So pretty fascinating. And the first part of your question, influences? Oh gosh, so many, just everything. If you love movies, you love them all. So, I think in terms of national cinemas, new German cinema, Japanese films of the 60s, the new, French New Wave, American films, silent movies, all of it. You could name anyone, I'll tell you what I think about them. But I love it all. It's a big question. Oh, hey.
Hey, how's it going? Ooh, okay.
Good.
Okay, so your entire filmography, you've got some, like, Dazed and Confused is like 18 hours time span. Then you have the Before trilogy, it's like moments over years. And then this one is just an entire, like, chapter of someone's life.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting how you play with time like that. But what was, like, the most challenging of those different time lapses, and which one did you kind of enjoy
of all
diving
the films?
into the most?
Yeah. This film kind of tweaks my average pretty enormously. I have all these short movies, so add 12 years and divide by, I'm back up to each one's an epic now. But I always find myself, I think if I've had to think about it a lot in this process. And I think in a general sense, I'm a big believer in structure. I think that's the way the mind works. We kind of find structure and patterns, and let's face it, humans created time. The universe doesn't think of itself in years or millennia. That's our trying to make sense of this life we're living. And but it's innate to our thinking. So I'm a big believer in structure. So I think I've largely replaced like conventional plot points with, story, character, but then structure. And a lot of those structures are kind of time-based. And it's for a reason. It just depends on what particular kind of story you're telling. And not every film. I've done much more, conventional. It just depends on what story you're telling. But quite often I end up in these time, little slices of time, whether it's real time, done that a couple times in tape, and Before Sunset, they're kind of a real time. And that's difficult. That has its own challenges. That's just as hard as 12 years here. Waking Life is arguably, no one can say what's the time frame of that movie, because I don't know, So it's arguably very little time. So you just don't know. But I do think there's something about time that I'm always trying to explore, because it's I don't know, the reality of how we perceive this, So I think that's where a lot of stories are, for me anyway. In the outer, in the boundaries of cinema and storytelling, and I think a lot about that, and I keep coming back to that. I think a lot that's where there's a lot of new territory. I always thought of film as the Wild West. There's just a lot of open territory out there to be claimed. I approach cinema that way, and narrative is still wide open. There's a lot of stories to tell. There's a lot of properties to cinema, unlike, say, theater or even literature, that are very particular to film, that the way we perceive it, the way we identify with it, that filmmakers can actually use to tell a new kind of story that isn't even experimental. It's not that radical, but you can communicate using those elements. So I've always felt there was something really cool and exciting there. So this is just one more kind of storytelling example of that kind of thinking, So anyway, I think that's my best overall thought. I hope I answered your question, but thank you.
I had one reader send me something that I hadn't thought of, and you probably haven't thought of it either. Those kids, and they may have been from Texas, I don't remember, who made a version of Raiders of the Lost Ark that they started filming when they were little kids.
I heard about that. They're old now, right?
And they finished it when they were... So Indiana Jones starts out being played by a kid.
Yeah, that's
and ends
such
up as an adult. That's almost the closest thing. A total accident, I guess. But
yeah, and that they stuck with it. Have you guys know about this?
It's called Raiders of the Lost Ark, the adaptation, right?
Yeah,
Something like that?
it played at the Alamo Draft House where I lived, and I never really saw it, but I saw some trailers to it, and it just seemed like kids recreating kind of shot by shot. But it took, they're in year 20-something? But that must start with like bad VHS, and then probably hopefully that money, it ends up looking wholly different. But then I heard he's like an not middle-aged, but a guy, who's 30, whatever.
He's an adult, yeah.
Yeah, who's now playing. That's pretty remarkable.
It's a pretty strange counterexample.
Yeah, I want to see that.
But your experiments with time and narrative, such an amazing addition to American cinema. I want to thank the Apple Store and thank you guys for
thanks for being here. It's
and
good
thanks
talking to you guys.
Linklater, everybody.